Are live. We are live, Ms. Mayor.
We're live? Okay, thank you so much, Julian. All right, well, thanks everybody for being here. We will call to order this meeting of the Intergovernmental Legislative Relations Committee, our last one for this regular session. Although we may have some more depending on what's going on with the feds, but we will start with our report from state lobbyists on the state legislature. I think if we're alternating, Mr. Thompson would go first this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Hi, everybody. We're at the waning moments, and obviously there's a lot of tension, but we're hopeful that, at least I have to report that we're very hopeful that the capital outlay bill will make its way back over to the House and everything will be fine with all of that. We have no reason to believe that it wouldn't, other than the normal last minute stress that is associated with the session. So we'll be watching that very carefully. And if it does in fact make it and makes its way upstairs to the governor, we would like to be able to work with you and the counselors and staff to make sure that we have the appropriate letters headed up to the governor's office, so that when they're doing their review on each project, that they have an articulation of each project, how the funding that they would receive, how they could use it, what it's matched with, et cetera, et cetera. So we will look forward to working with everyone on that, fingers crossed, when the bill gets upstairs.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions on Capitol? Okay, well, you and Libby and your team have done a great job for us as always, so thank you. We'll move on to Mr. Jaramillo.
Yes, thank you, Sarita and counselors. So, the Capitol is going to, Joe and his team, of course, do a fantastic job on that. And I don't think that that's really at issue. But so the Senate kind of is using that now as their backstop, because at some point, the Republicans will have to stop filibustering to get the Capitol bill heard. And so, everybody who's watching it could take a while, because they want to get the cannabis bill on and off yesterday. It was supposed to be heard yesterday, but there was a threat of a 15-hour filibuster. So instead, they went to House Bill 20, which was important to the city of Albuquerque because the amended version was going to make it applicable to all public employees, which was really a poison pill because it just wasn't a workable, and there's myriad reasons why you couldn't have that bill in the public sector. And so that bill was stripped out. Some of you probably have read about the extreme, I don't think you could say unprecedented, because lots of weird stuff has happened up here, but unusual drama that took place prior to the restoration of regular order, which is just long filibustering till 3 o'clock. So that bill was fixed, and it doesn't impact the city. Other bills that moved yesterday, Senate Bill 8, which is the air quality bill that's going to help our folks deal with some of the issues in the South Valley with air. It's going to help us with diesels. That made it across the finish line and is done. I'm still hopeful that Senate Bill 285, which is the mental health pickup bill, might get heard. We're working with Representative Ream, who amended the bill positively in House Judiciary, to get that on the Republican We Won't 3-hour debate rule, and maybe that'll get heard. We're working with Chairman Chasey, and the Speaker certainly knows that that's a priority for us. Unfortunately, that bill was sponsored by Senator Ivy Soto, and that complicates it, although today he did withdraw his name from all of his bills and handed them to Jerry Ortiz-Pino. But, so Chair Chasey is ready to present it on the floor if it comes up, as is Representative Ream. So we're hopeful that'll get across the finish line. Cannabis is still important to the city, because if it gets across the finish line, it's 4% on top of GRT, not for probably another year and a half, but still coming down the pipe. If I had to guess, the leadership is working on some version. My understanding is the tax, there's a lot of things that are going to be changed, but that what would be important to City of Albuquerque, the tax structure is not going to be changed. So that 4% on top of GRT is going to stay there. And so I think when we all wake up, well, I won't, I'll be up for it all, but when you all wake up tomorrow morning and the blogs are out or whatever, you'll know whether it's passed and probably at that point concurred on or not in the House. Those are the major bits of legislation. Happy to answer other questions, of course, as always.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, well, seeing none, are there any action items related to these reports that we need to cover? Okay, well, of course, you're always welcome to stay, but at this point, we can allow our state lobbyists to get to the finish line. So thank you all very much, and good luck.
I'm gonna take a nap and then get coffee going because it's gonna be all the House said they're gonna stay on the floor through the duration. So
great. All right. Well, everybody be safe. Have fun.
Pleasure to work with all of you as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will turn now to our update from federal lobbyists. Mr. O'Donnell, would you like to start?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. First, a COVID update. We received an inquiry this week from the city about how much homeless assistance funding and rental assistance funding the city might get from this most recent American Rescue Plan Act. And we've estimated the numbers. We think these are pretty close to what the city will receive. So in homeless assistance, it's about $7.6 million. And I said last week that in terms of that Gateway Center project, the homeless project, you could probably use some of this funding, excuse me, for that project. In rental assistance, we estimate, and Treasury has to come out with this number, but we estimate it's going to be around $18.2 million, 18.2 million. And the reason we estimate that is the state got less money this time than it got in the COVID bill that was passed in December. In December, the state got 200 million. This time around, they got 152 million. And we figured the last time around, the city got about 12% of that 200. So we took 12% of this 152, comes out to 18.2. The rental assistance funding has to be made in 2 payments under the law. 40% each grant recipient will get within the first 60 days. And then the remaining funds are only dispersed after 75% of that initial allocation is spent. And then after March 31st, 2022, HUD would reallocate the unallocated funds from recipients. Also on the COVID front, this week, the Conference of Mayors, in response to an inquiry that they got from the Treasury Department about city questions regarding the implementation of the American Rescue Plan, we sent the city information about responding to the Conference of Mayors collecting questions that cities had about specific provisions in the ARP. And the city did respond, and we sent those questions to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we appreciate the fact that the city did respond to those and had some good points. I won't get into those details. We're still basically checking the Treasury website every day to find out if they've updated their information available on ARP. And the only thing that was on there today is that they did release those checks last week for those individuals that received the $1,400 and additional funding. But there's no other information available. And as I said, we do check it. We also check in with the government finance officers who, as I said last week, generally get a good amount of information out of Treasury early. I would turn to, and I don't know if Jeff, well, let me ask you, are there any questions on the COVID section here that I've reported on?
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Any questions? All right, so far so good. Please continue.
Okay, what I would turn to next, and I believe we sent everybody this afternoon, or you've received it from Jeff Hertz or Tom Menicucci, the breakout that we did following last week's discussion about the projects that were listed that we received as part of the city's 2021 federal program. And what we've done on this list is take the projects that there are federal accounts available for earmarking. And the subcommittees call those community project funding. So what we've done is list the subcommittee, and then in the blue text print, that is the information that is on the subcommittee's website about the information required for a earmark request. And if you look at those, you will see there's quite a bit of detail that is required in order to submit an earmark. And I would observe that most of this information is probably something that would have to come from city departments in order to fill out most of the information. There are a few questions on there about federal program accounts and some other things that we can probably fill in, but most of the program information would have to come from city departments. And I would say that the reason why last week we did not have Double Eagle 2 airport on the earmarks, because we didn't think there was enough information. But going back and looking at the AIP information required by the T-HUD committee, it was our thought that probably the airport does have a project that would fit the criteria and could be requested. Now, what I'm about to say applies to all of these earmarks. They do have to show, some subcommittees are more focused on community support. The fact that you can cite community support for the request. Another one is, and I mentioned this last week, is the amount of funding that you can request under these earmarks. Kyriakis, let me ask Kyriakis, I think earlier today, Kyriakis, you mentioned to me that you had seen some report that had been done about the scale, the extent of earmarks, the funding that had been appropriated back in 2010. Did you want to comment at all on that?
Sure, and just one quick note, I think the document that's on the screen might be an older version. John, I think we had updated this one to an updated version, but yes, we had a conversation with an appropriations committee staffer on the House side, and his comment back was, look at the FY10 and FY9, FY08 numbers, which we've done, and I know Isaac and Tom and I think Jeff have all seen some of those previous earmarks, and the range fall between 200,000 and upwards of maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, depending on I think where the member is on the committee, on seniority, etc. So the scale of projects, I think realistically fall within those ranges, and that would be the federal share of a project. So, and again, and I think it depends on the account and whether that account requires a local match. Like transportation projects are typically 80-20. T-HUD EDI projects do not have a local match requirement. So it just really depends on the account. But I think it's realistic to expect that, you know, the price tag on some of these will be within that range.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So the first part then is, are the projects that we believe would qualify for earmarks, what we think will happen when you start to look at what's required for each request in answering the subcommittee questions, you may find that there may be a reason that you don't have the necessary information and that item may drop off the list. But I think we're going to need to talk we should have a way to converse during next week, probably by Wednesday, about what the initial examination of those requirements mean to a department and whether they feel they have that information. The second part of this paper is surface transportation earmarks, because as I mentioned last week, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee on the House side has announced that they are going to accept earmarks. And we think that these projects listed fall into the category where they would be eligible for an earmark. I don't think that what the city can do is submit 5 earmark requests. I think there might be some projects on this list that are more ready for construction. That may be one of the filters that's used to select the one or ones that might be candidates for an earmark in the reauthorization. And Kyriakis, remind me again, what's the date by which the House wants these?
So the Appropriations Committee just announced today that they're pushing back their deadlines, and each subcommittee has its own. But the first deadline is the 28th, and the last one is the 30th of April.
That's for appropriations. What's the one for transportation and infrastructure, the authorization?
Yeah, it's a surface transportation. Yeah, we checked in with them today, and they have not announced a deadline yet.
Okay. So that second grouping there then would be candidate projects for the reauthorization of the surface transportation, an earmark. Then below that, we list the ones that because they look eligible for federal grants, and they're on that list either because there's no earmarking of the account which those programs would need to get funding from, or in the case of the San Antonio Arroyo and the Rio Grande levee, in the Corps of Engineers guidance from the Energy and Water Development Subcommittee, they say you can't ask for funding through the Corps unless the project is authorized. And there's something we don't know about the Rio Grande levee, and that I would think it's an authorized project, but you'd have to go back and check with a MAFCA or directly with the Corps of Engineers to determine that. And the San Antonio Arroyo is a study, and we think actually that there's a way to get funding for this project through what we've mentioned before as the environmental infrastructure account with the Corps of Engineers. And the price tag for this is pretty reasonable. It fits within what we know they make environmental infrastructure funding available. We know that it fits within that amount. This is a project and that the city would really need to approach the Corps of Engineers and tell them that you have an interest in funding for this and determine with them if it's really eligible for the Rural Western Water Environmental Infrastructure Account funding. We can help with that, and we can help with the Rio Grande levee, but I think somebody within municipal development, if that's the correct department, would need to determine if this is a project where a MAFCA would be in the lead, or if it's a partnership in which you would have to seek this funding from the Corps with a MAFCA. And then finally, the projects that are listed, most, as you can see, most all of those, we don't have cost figures for those, and therefore it's really difficult to move forward either with an earmark or a grant. And I mentioned that down at the bottom, I think there is the grant, the Gateway Center, and that Gateway Center I mentioned earlier, that may actually be eligible for the use of your homeless assistance money that you get from the American Rescue Plan. Are there any questions? Madam Chairman?
Any questions? You know, I might suggest on the MAFCA item that we involve Councilor Borrego. I think she still sits on that board as well. I don't know if Isaac or one of the councilors, you want to let her know about those questions. And then on the police services, I think, you know, for us, those are pretty much Bureau of Justice Assistance and other DOJ grants. And that we've been pretty good on those so far. What would be interesting is if anyone is going to introduce legislation to roll back some of the things that we've been fighting about with the DOJ in court in terms of getting that money. And so, you know, if that happens to come up, we would love to advocate in favor of that legislation. But so far, we've won all our court cases, so we can just keep doing that if we need to. And then in terms of the Gateway Center, I do think, you know, if there was that's has a strong capital aspect. If there were to be an opportunity to earmark, but of course, yes, we think that SAMHSA money as well as the homelessness and housing money could all play a part, not just in the operation of the center itself, but in the things that we're connecting people to through the Gateway.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Chairwoman, I'm glad you mentioned the police services and the Gateway, because on police services, I did speak with Maria Garcia Cunningham yesterday about the police services and also about the shot spotter. And she was going to be checking with the commander on the priority of what I think are like an additional 8 locations. And we think in conversation with her that, you know, the shot spotter request would be eligible under the burn JAG or COPS, depending on the technology part of the COPS. And on police services, what I said to Maria Garcia Cunningham was, we just need to have kind of a specific element that we would be looking to fund in order to make that an earmark request. And I think she's going to be talking with some people about that possibility, because I know it is a priority for the mayor and council to be addressing those issues. So your comment, coming back to where I started on this, is we don't need to decide this now, but we would like to be engaged with departments over the next week to provide them answers to some of the questions they might have about those subcommittee forms, requests for information. So perhaps we could follow up with whoever you believe is appropriate on Monday to talk about how we make ourselves available to talk with city departments about those details.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Isaac, would that be you as the best conduit there? Yeah, Mr. Heck, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments or action items related to the federal report? Okay, any other business? Okay, well, hearing none, thank you everybody for your participation. Who knows whether we'll meet here again soon, but Have enjoyed having you all on the committee, and I appreciate all the time you put into it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.